everybody to the Zoning Board of Appeals public hearing, Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. I motion to open the meeting. Can I have a second?
Second.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have in attendance in person, Jeffrey Blinkoff, our legal counsel, Luke Ferrin, and Joyce Giffra, members of the board, and via Zoom, Susan Stevenson and Julia McCormick. And our village planner is reaching us by Zoom, Alex Wallach, as well as our environmental consultant, Chick Voorhees. So for the first matter, we have a pending decision, case number 3152, which is 125 Burnett Street, but we are not yet ready with the written opinion, so we'll hold this over to our next meeting. Is that correct, Jeffrey?
Yes, my apologies. There was a miscommunication on that. I will have that available as soon as possible.
So moving on, we have, with respect to case number 3144, Stephen Hickey, 1377 Meadow Lane, a request to adjourn to our meeting June 22nd. So I'll motion to accept the applicant's request to adjourn case number 3144, 1377 Meadow Lane to June 22nd. Can I have a second?
Second?
And all in favor of accepting the adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that's unanimous, and then we can move on to case number 3153, Smithtown Partners, 40 Meadow Lane. We received additional information from the applicant, including letters from council, plans, and a letter from a structural engineer. In order to fully consider this additional information, as well as to make any further inquiry as a result of reviewing that additional information, I'll make a motion to reopen case number 3153, 40 Meadow Lane. Can I have a second?
Second?
Second.
And all in favor of reopening case number 3153, 40 Meadow Lane, say aye.
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 Okay, and then, as the board will need the opportunity to fully review these materials and to assess the need for any further inquiries, I will move to adjourn to the next meeting of the board, case number 3153, 40 Meadow Lane. Can I have a second?
Second that?
And all in favor of adjourning to the next public hearing, case number 3153, please say aye.
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 So we are unanimous. We move on then to case number 3147, 64 Down East Lane, Andrew Fleiss.
Mr. Chairman,
Did I skip
with
something?
respect to 3146, number 371 Hill Street, was the board going to accept?
Did I skip that?
Yes.
I did. Excuse me, let me go back. My apologies. With respect to case number 3146, 71 Hill Street LLC, we have a request from the applicant to withdraw 71 Hill Street LLC without prejudice. Can I have a motion to accept the applicant's withdrawal without prejudice?
Yeah. I move.
Aye.
And
Yes.
all in favor in case number 3146, 71 Hill Street, to accept the applicant's request for withdrawal without prejudice, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Jeffrey. Now we're moving on to case number 3147, 64 Down East Lane.
Good evening, members of the board, council. On behalf of the applicant, Andrew Fleiss and Jennifer Carter, Carl Benicasa, 186 Montauk Highway, Watermill, New York. We've been here several times discussing this application, and as I do every time, I'll briefly just go through the process which has led us here. Originally, this was an application for variances and wetlands permit related to the construction of a kayak dock on Hetty Creek with a kayak ramp and catwalk, and then a wharfing out into the navigable waters. In that process, it was discovered that there was an unrecorded buffer back in 2000. That buffer currently does not exist in the sense that it has not been, in its current state, it is not planted and vegetated as it should have been. It was in its current state when my client purchased the property. In consideration of the fact that this buffer does not exist in compliance, the application for the dock was put on hold until we could determine how we are proceeding with the wetland buffer. Under the recent village law amendment, of course, we cannot obtain any approvals for constructions of new structures until the land is determined to be in compliance with regulation. The building department issued a determination that it was not, given the state of the buffer. So we are proceeding in accordance with that new law with a request to amend the buffer. That request, if granted, would permit us to would allow for the board to consider the structure, in that our request related to that buffer would be that we approve a revised buffer and permit some time to plant it. In consideration of that, then we would be, and our position is we would be in a state of conformity and then can proceed to approving the dock. When we were last here, the board's environmental consultant asked that certain documents be prepared related to the current buffer and the proposed buffer, specifically that they be overlaid over each other so that a distinction could be observed by the board, and that the survey provided demonstrate the location of a swing set, which exists within the current buffer, but would be outside the proposed buffer. As you may recall, when we were last here, Mr. Walker from Inner Science informed us that he would not be able to attend this meeting as he had a family obligation, but we are happy to have with us Richard Warren from Inner Science, who helped in compiling the documents the board requested and can present a bit on the nature of the buffer and its specifics. So I'll turn it to Mr. Warren.
Good evening, Richard Warren from InterScience Research Associates. I'm here filling in for Jim Walker, who couldn't be here tonight. I've been to the property and I've had a chance to look at the conditions. I've looked at the file. I've also listened to the hearing transcript, the hearing that you had at the last meeting, so I could get a sense to make sure that I was addressing the issues that were raised. At the last meeting, the board asked for a survey that showed the position of the existing structures, the fence, the swing set, the trampoline, the stepping stone. So the survey was updated. I'm going to ask John from my office to put that up on the screen for you so you can see it. And you'll see that all those structures are now located down in the south east corner of the property, along with the fence. I think you should all have hard copies of this, I believe, as well. So there you can see in the corner the play set, the trampoline, the tree swing, the wire fence. We have topography on the survey. And you'll see over here in the bottom left-hand corner where the slate is located for where the dock would be. You asked for a setback for the swing set to the property line and the trampoline to the property line. Although it's not on the drawing, we spoke with the surveyor, Pat Secafico, this morning. I just found that yesterday, and we weren't able to get that on the drawing to you. So the swing set is 19.1 feet from the eastern property line, which is the play set there. So it's 19.1 feet, and the trampoline is 11.2 feet. These are features that are sitting on the ground. The trampoline is not anchored to the ground at all. It just has these metal bottom rungs that sit on top of the grass. The planting plan, you asked for an approved buffer plan be overlaid on top of the proposed buffer plan. John, can you put up our drawing? Yeah, so this is the Aries plan. This is the plan that was approved 23 years ago, which you now have in your file. And in this drawing, you'll see the property boundary lines at the southern end of the property. You see that dashed line that's right above where it says wetlands. That's the wetlands line that was determined at the time when this plan was done, and you'll see the buffer that goes up above that. We asked to have this overlaid on top of our drawing, so we put that on top of ours. John, can you bring ours up? So you'll see this yellow line right here, I guess yellow and blue line. That is the buffer line edge that was part of the approved plan. And you'll see the other the coloration that shows the different vegetation now is showing where we're proposing the buffer. You asked about calculating the buffer width between the approved plan and the proposed plan. Because the two wetlands lines are different, it's a little hard to try to compare apples to apples. So what I did is I measured them from the southern property line. The yellow line that shows the buffer that was created 23 years ago is about 75 feet from the southern property line on average. You'll see on our plan, you'll see that it extends considerably more landward on the western side, and it gets closer on the eastern side. On the western side, it's about 128 feet at its deepest point, and at the shallowest point, it's about 38 feet in that area. So if you tried to average those two out, we're probably about an 80-foot buffer by the time we're done. That's the way I've roughly calculated it. About 60% of the frontage of this property has a buffer that's greater than what was proposed last time through. So I'm probably not supposed to walk away from that. But 60%, essentially this area through here and this area through here, this would be the remainder that is less than the 75 foot, which is this zone through here. You asked at the last meeting, the proposed buffer be expanded and reduce the area of lawn around the swing set area, so that has been done. The area was originally about 65 feet wide around the swing set, where the grass is now, it's 38 feet wide at that narrowest point. The buffer is actually increased in size. If you look at the area of what was originally the buffer, that was 17,470 square feet. We're now at 18,100 square feet. So we've provided a larger buffer than what had originally been approved. You asked for information regarding the spacing and quantity of little bluestem and panicum. John, can you just scroll up on the top, the legend? And you actually asked for some details on the planting, so we've provided that information here on this plan. I noticed in looking at this that it didn't have the actual spacing for the switchgrass or the panicum, so we confirmed that they would be planted as plugs 1 foot on center. So it's a pretty dense planting that would take place in those areas where you'll see the square footage under quantities. You know, for the switchgrass, we have 2,135 square feet, and for the little bluestem, it's 2,026 square feet. So those areas would be planted 1 foot on center. The buffer is going to consist of native trees and shrubs, shadbush, groundsel-bush, inkberry, highbush blueberry, and arrowwood, along with drifts of native wildflowers and grasses like switchgrass, little bluestem grass, and swamp rose. Can you scroll back to the image, John? So you'll see here on the side of the southwest corner, it shows the proposed catwalk. So we've kept that on the plan. It's a 4-foot wide catwalk with a rack for a kayak sling, which you'll see on the west side of the walkway, which is really just some bars to be able to someone lift a kayak and leave it there instead of dragging it back and putting it back in the lawn. So we have a 4-foot by 20-foot ramp that adjoins the kayak rack, 24-foot long fixed catwalk that's elevated 4.5 feet above grade, a 20-foot section that's ramping back down to where the little platform is. That's right at the edge of the small little platform that provides access to the water. There's a ladder that will provide the ability to climb up and down once you get your kayak down into the water. And it's really to provide access for kayaks and canoes. You've got shallow water coming into this creek, and the owner has a mooring out further where he can put a motorized vessel. This is essentially identical to what is across the pond in terms of functional use. That you can see on the bottom of our drawing, you'll see that's at 405 Captain's Neck Lane. We had actually done that approval for those people some time ago. The construction's all untreated materials. It'll have open grading surface, minimum light transparency is 60%, so it's that open grate that allows vegetation to grow underneath. It'll all be constructed by hand. We've received permits for the dock from the trustees, the DEC, and the Department of State, and the Army Corps. So I guess I'm here to try to fill in for Jim, but we think that the buffer plan that we have is reasonable given that this client purchased this property with an understanding at the time that there wasn't a buffer here. We've tried to be fair and reasonable in terms of the size of the buffer, the location of the buffer, the ability for him to have a small area where he can have a play area for his children, which is down in an area on the lawn that's flat. You have a sloping area that comes from the pool down to this corner, so it's actually a flat area where there's a place for the kids to play. So we don't believe that this revised buffer plan is going to have any negative impacts to the protection of the waters of Hetty Creek. And we think it's substantial. It'll remove a substantial part of the lawn. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have with respect to this.
Do any board members have questions, Luke or? Chick, can we hear from you with respect to your evaluation and the purposes of a wetlands buffer and whether this accomplishes the purposes of the wetlands buffer that was previously required?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the introduction earlier, Mark, and
Where to
Rich.
look?
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for the summary from you and Carl as well.
Trying to figure out where to look.
Probably on the TV screen. I'm not there in person, obviously. So, yeah, thank you, Mark. Rich was describing a submission that was submitted to the village on February 24th. Rich did a good job in identifying the discussion from the last meeting and bringing things up to date. And I'll further note that, you know, at this time on the plan, the prior buffer is shown, so we have a relative understanding of the prior approval, the buffer area, and how large that was. The buffer equivalent is shown, and that really is the expanded buffer, as was described, that exceeds the area of the original buffer. The planting plan detail has been added. That was one of the requests. And the native plantings that are shown are acceptable. I do think it's important to look critically at the area where the buffer is being encroached upon. And that is specifically the play set and some of the other recreational items such as the trampoline. And in doing that, you know, I want to kind of go back to the village law under Chapter 116 and really what it's trying to do. As you know, if something like this came before us now, we would be looking at a buffer of 125 feet. And that's because a greater buffer provides greater protection from the wetlands, and it's considered adjacent area, at least that's how the state defines it. But in village law, it is the landscape buffer, and it's intended to be naturally maintained or revegetated. That adjacent area protects the wetlands and their environmental benefits. And the wetlands themselves have many benefits, including habitat, biological productivity, ecosystem cleansing, absorption of silt and organic materials, shoreline protection, flood control, and also in some areas, educational value. That's the benefit of the wetlands associated with the creek that this adjoins. The actual adjacent area, or the village landscape buffer, is very important from the standpoint of protection of those wetlands. It also provides its own wildlife habitat, pollution absorption, erosion control, and you know, further protects the wetlands. So we know that natural buffers are important. They also reduce the fertilized lawn area. They reduce areas for congregation of either dogs or geese or some you know, animal life that may impact wetlands other than native species, because it becomes kind of a recreational area as opposed to a buffer area. And the wider the buffer, the better the protection. And this is, as I said, reflected in village law under Chapter 125. I'm sorry, village law, Chapter 116. So, in my mind, ideally, the place that should not be so close to the wetlands. And one of the questions that, you know, I would look to further clarify, Rich, when you have the surveyor plotting this, is what is the setback from the actual wetlands? I heard what it is from the property line, but if this is a structure that encroaches within the buffer area, we do need to know the setback from the wetlands themselves. And then it's really going to be up to the zoning board of appeals to consider if the playset should be allowed to remain. And if that is the case, and we're going down that path to give that consideration, I really feel that because of the encroachment and what we have as a minimal setback, where the lawn area goes very close to the wetlands themselves, and does encourage fertilized area, and then, you know, domestic animal activity, as well as, you know, potentially geese or other animals if not controlled, that could impact the wetlands because of what I mentioned before, the importance of the wetland buffer and providing that adjacent area and protecting the wetlands themselves. So I can further comment on mitigation or other ways to help to maintain a place set, but also have some environmental compatibility if the board wishes to consider that further. So I'll pause there and just see if there are any further questions or how much discussion we want to get into on the placement of the place set itself.
Well, could you briefly say, I don't know what to, if that's the only flat place, I mean, this guy has kids. What would have been your suggestions that you're not telling us?
Oh, well,
Could
first of all, as I
briefly
said,
tell us?
ideally, under current law and current review, it would not be located in this location.
I
And
get
there are
that.
other areas on the property where it could be located. If we were to consider allowing it to remain, I would look for additional mitigation because of the encroachment within the setback area, and that minimized buffer. Yes, this does achieve a buffer equivalent, but if you look at the placement of it and its proximity to the wetlands, I think additional mitigation really is appropriate. And I will, Susan, I'll spell that out, again, for the ZBA to consider and for the applicant to consider as well. It was mentioned that the trampoline is a movable object, just a moment ago by Rich. That should really not be within the area that is part of what would have been the buffer imposed in 2000. So moving that out, you know, would not be a hardship, and there's plenty of other area for that to be relocated to. I think that revegetating greater, and whether it's 10%, 20%, or, you know, 30% greater than the original buffer, would be a benefit, and that would reduce lawn area, create the habitat that's one of the benefits of the adjacent area. I believe that not fertilizing the area that's within the original 2000 buffer would be another measure that would be beneficial. As I said before, one of the benefits of the buffer is removing nitrogen, fertilization, and lawn area from areas close to wetlands. There are grasses and other ground cover techniques that are compatible with recreational use that don't require fertilization. And this board has approved native fescues, and there are other ground covers that we can let the applicant propose that would not require fertilization, and then covenanting that no fertilization would occur within that area. So those are some of the things that could be considered in order to offset that encroachment within the buffer area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Here's my thing, is a playset, I mean, doesn't it get attached with like a couple of stakes in the ground? I don't know what this place that is, but maybe it's bigger than that. But, you know, when your kids are like 11, I don't think they play with it. Then it can be removed. That was, the permanence of this thing is part of what I wonder about. I mean, no
Well,
one.
Alex, I think,
here-
has a photo of it. Alex, can you put up a photo of, do you have that accessible?
Let me see, if it was part of their submission, then I do have it.
And then, I mean, I realize that this is in a place where it shouldn't, it's being positioned in a place that is not preferable, but, you know, everyone else who lives in the village is not getting a petition to put their swing set, you know, they just put it up, as far as I can tell. I don't know if there are a lot of building permits.
Alex, I do have a photo available from a report that I sent to the board, if you'd like me to share that. Or if
Great.
you're close, would that be
That would be-
helpful?
Sure. Thanks, Jake.
Is that visible at this time?
Yep.
Let me see if I can reformat this a little.
Shouldn't you come in a little? So
I'm
it's,
trying. Give me 1 second. There we go. So this is the place that we're talking about. Is that visible?
yes,
And that's what is now shown on the survey. That is the topic of discussion. This shows the Japanese maple tree that is plotted on the survey that's within that grass, within the original buffer. And this is from farther from the property line. This is the gate with the slate, and this is the wetland area that the open through-flow decking dock would be placed in. So that's really the best I have on the swing set.
Chick, do you have a picture of the entire backyard?
These are the only ones that I took when I was there, concentrating on the original buffer area.
Mhm.
We can go to an aerial photograph that would show other parts of the backyard, if that's helpful.
We don't have, I was just thinking about the contours, and we don't have the contours
There is topography on the survey. that we
on the
provided.
survey. Let's go to that.
Spot elevations, not contours, spot elevations.
Jeffrey, can you also speak to our guidance with the new legislation? In other words, I thought in a way this was one of the things we were trying to avoid, which was negotiating the,
Well, this actually, I think, would be in compliance, because what council was explaining is that what they're asking to do is to address the open violation, and if the sole purpose of the application before the board is to try to cure that, which I think they can seek to try to do by asking for a modification. Whether or not the board grants it is up to the board, but that's their sole request. So that is in keeping with the legislation.
so, but what are the standards for a modification under the law?
The standards go back to the same as the original. When the board is assessing the wetlands application, it will be the same standards, the same ones that Chick was just referring to, that Mr. Voorhees was referring to.
Right.
There's no difference under the new
So,
legislation.
Chick, I guess the question I have for you, more succinctly is, does this protect the environment? Does the revised plan protect the environment, protect the wetlands, as well as the wetlands buffer that was required under the prior ZBA decision?
Well, I think part of my outlining the benefits of wetlands and the adjacent area was to get to that question. And at least as it's proposed currently, I don't believe it does protect it as well as the original buffer would, primarily because of the encroachment.
This is Rich Warren. I would like to think that we could come to some agreement to how we work this out. But as a zoning board of appeals, I would like to think and hope that you would take into account the fact that this was a piece of property that was purchased with the conditions that are there today. A certificate of occupancy was secured by the purchaser from the village that showed these conditions at that time. There was no covenant that was filed in the county clerk's office, so we had no notice of it, and this notice came up when we came in for the application. So I'd like to think that we're here to try to find some balance, and I'd like to think that this board will include in their consideration some balance of the equities here, where, you know, a guy comes in and buys a piece of property with conditions, without any understanding that this is out of compliance, because he did get a CO for it. And we're here in good faith to try to resolve that. And I believe that having the larger buffer is something that is not inconsequential to him. This gives a small area for, you know, if you have kids, you know that your kids want to have a little place that they're away from their parents to have some fun. This is an area that is in the back corner of the property. That's probably why he put it there. It is flat. You can see here it's almost flat, but it probably slopes up to the swimming pool in the backside, so you want to have some area. We can move the trampoline because it only has to be moved 4 feet if you want us to get us out of that buffer. So we can just have a couple of guys pick it up and drag it sideways 4 feet, if that's what's necessary. We'll talk to the client about non-fertilization in this area. I'm not sure he would oppose that, the area that would encroach within the original 75-foot buffer. But I do think and hope that this board actually, in your consideration, actually thinks a little bit about the balance of equities here.
The balance of equities. Why should this guy not have to comply with the rules of this property? He just doesn't want to. I can't believe you're saying this to us with a straight face. There's no hardship imposed upon him by complying to the rules that come attached to this property. We're not talking about construction or millions of dollars of cost. We're talking about someone who just doesn't want to do it. And you're standing here defending that?
Yeah,
Thinking?
I am standing here and
That's
defending it.
ridiculous.
Well, I think your position.
He should just do what he's legally bound to do with this property. It doesn't matter when he found out. It's attached to the property. And you're trading apples for oranges here. It doesn't matter if you take this buffer up to the street. You're proposing to have almost no buffer at the water. You know better than this. And to stand here and say that it's as good as the buffer that's legally attached to the land, you know that's not true.
I don't want to get in a fight with the zoning board of appeals.
You're not getting into a fight with me because there's no fight to be had.
Yeah, but you're presenting it a little hostilely, so I don't want to really.
It's just how long do we have to hear the same application? Just
This is
get
my this is
your
my
property
first, this is my
in-
first time here.
fair enough. Get the property into compliance. You're not making a fair trade here, and also we're not obliged to horse trade with you. Your guy just doesn't want to do it. That's the only reason that you're still here.
Requests were made by the environmental consultant, which we're obliged to. That's the reason we were here. This board asked for additional information, and we're providing it. This was the earliest opportunity. The creek, as you know, becomes more dry as you come more east. We are proposing additional buffer at the more sensitive portion of the creek. Would a non-fertilization buffer, Mr. Voorhees, I'm asking you, would that change your mind about whether the proposal creates a detriment to the wetlands if we covenanted that we wouldn't fertilize the area of the original buffer?
But Carl, again, what is the guy's problem with moving a playset? We're not asking him to demolish built construction. We're not infringing upon the heated and habitable space of his home. This is a playset that was literally attached by pins in the ground. He should just move it and comply with the rules of the property. He just doesn't want to, and that's not good enough of a reason.
There's, as you can, the grade on the property.
No. Let's go back to respond to what I said. The grade on the
It's not
property.
just that he doesn't
we can
wanna
look
move
at the
it.
spot elevations. Look, there's no real variation in the grade. There's tons of alternate locations for this place set. Tons. The whole property, the whole lawn, the whole east side to the east side of the house is a good location for this. Again, he just doesn't want to move a playset. And why should he not have to conform with the rules that are attached to this property? You're not making any sort of compelling argument on why he shouldn't.
But again, it's a balance of his preference, and we can, if I'm, I'll accept, for purpose of this argument, I'll accept your position that he could move it. I don't know if that's the case, given the topography.
Stop.
But let's, no, you put it out
Or
there.
he could eliminate the play set. I mean, it's not,
He could,
it's not a swimming pool, it's a play set.
it is what, does that mean you don't consider it a structure, or?
No, it means I don't consider it that
It's a
valuable.
play area,
Okay, it's
let's
it's
be direct.
when we're
Everyone-
when we're balancing. So here's the balance that I'm seeing. Okay, on one hand, this board would like to, with its environmental consultant, protect the water bodies that it has jurisdiction to protect.
Absolutely.
So that's why, in exchange for the expansion of the house, the prior members of the zoning board for the village of Southampton imposed a certain wetlands buffer. There was a trade. Okay, yes, go ahead, expand the house, and as a result, the current applicant has a larger house that he was able to purchase, but the trade-off was they were supposed to, the property owner at that time was supposed to implement a wetlands buffer. So on one hand, this board wants to protect the wetlands. Okay.
Absolutely.
So this is how we're balancing our equities. And, with our environmental consultant, we're saying, do we want to risk, a detriment to the wetlands, a deterioration of the wetlands? On the other hand, this particular applicant would like to keep a play set. And I'm not, the board members will come to their own, decision as to how those, factors balance. But correct me if I'm wrong, that seems to be what balance we're trying to create. On one hand, the interest that the applicant has is he wants to preserve the location of a play set or the existence of a play set. Let's take for a moment that it's possible that it couldn't be located elsewhere. So we want a play set versus we want to protect the wetlands. And I guess that's our deliberation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. And I think all Luke is saying is that he's forecasting for you. I think he would probably weigh protecting the wetlands with much greater weight than preserving the location of a play set.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's an incredibly credible position. The question, the presentation that we're making and the question we ask this board to consider is there a way to achieve both? Now, all I'm asking, I just wanted to Mr. Voorhees, if we covenanted that you were not to fertilize the current boundaries of the existing buffer and agreed to expand the buffer in the new location proposed, considering how Hetty Creek has evolved over time, whereas it is not as habitable, I guess it's not as vibrant a wetland towards the eastern portion of the property as it was when this buffer was proposed. If we make that trade-off, is there a compromise to the wetlands? And that's the question. And if this board believes there is, then I understand this board's position. If this board believes we can achieve a commiserate protection of the wetlands as was offered in 2000, with my client's ability to keep that playset in the preferred area, would the board at that point be willing to accept this revision? And remember, it's not just taking away portion. We are adding portions to the most sensitive we are adding significant square footage to the buffer in the what I believe is the most sensitive area, affecting the most sensitive area of the wetlands. So that is the question. And this board is correct in how it's weighing balancing the consideration. And we are not asking them to detriment the wetlands for a play set. We're asking, is there a way for both? And I guess that's the question posed to this board. Now, Mr. Voorhees answered, he believes in its current configuration that is not the case. But if we were to covenant, because you had mentioned the fertilization is a concern, if we were to covenant that it is a non-fertilization buffer for the entire area of the existing covenant, would that change your perspective? And I don't know if I'm not, again, trying to put you on the spot, but do you think that would impact your assessment? Chick.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just probably give a longer-winded answer, because I don't always like being on the spot, but, Susan had asked before, Ms. Member Stevenson had asked before, for me to outline some of the considerations that would help to mitigate that encroachment. And I outlined them, and I can go back through them again. I do want to go to the report that I had given to the Board of Appeals back in November, which did identify and showed the natural wetland system associated with the creek that we're talking about. And so, I just want to kind of correct or perhaps take exception with some of Mr. Benincas's representation about whether you go east or west along the creek. This is a really significant intertidal marsh of Spartina alterniflora. And you can see the groundsel bush, the Bacchus, in bloom. And yes, there's a little bit of Phragmites, and that does increase as you go upland. But this entire wetland system is pretty important. And I had expressed, when we had first seen the dock proposal, some concern about making sure that this wetlands is able to continue to flourish, because it's really a beautiful stand of intertidal marsh. So in looking at, the swing set itself and its encroachment, I'd indicated that further expanding the buffer, that could be potentially closer to the swing set, rather than 38 feet, is there something less? That could include expanding the buffer farther into the property by some increased amount, above the 18 or so thousand square feet, that would help to offset the encroachment. And one of the items that I mentioned was to not fertilize that area, because that is one of the concerns. So I really presented them in combination. It's ultimately up to this board, the ZBA, to make the determination of the adequacy. And, I guess it really was kind of under the potential that there would be some horse trading, or at least some discussion on ways that we could help further mitigate the encroachment and allow the swing set to remain. So, that's really up to the board. And it's also up to the applicant to make their case and show that they're consistent with the provisions of Chapter 116 to protect the wetlands. I'm here to provide guidance, assist wherever I can, and I believe that I've done that thus far.
Julia, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you for asking.
Joyce, are you?
No, I'm okay. I think it would be a little bit helpful for us to see like an aerial photo of the property so we get a better sense about potential alternate locations. Do we have one?
Alex, did you have that?
There's several on file. Certainly on the town's GIS we can see. I know in the original presentation we did provide them.
Alex, are you there? Could you provide some aerial overviews?
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to see if I
Thank
can
you.
pull up aerial that I had prepared.
Yeah, those were helpful. Let me stop sharing. I can bring those up as well, but,
Yeah, I see one or two older ones here on file, but they're not that helpful. I mean, they're too distant, I think.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
hard.
that's, okay.
It was, the property as captured in July 2022, and I believe you can see the swing set in the bottom right.
Yes, you can.
You can't see the zip line, the masonry
Tetherball.
patio, or the trampoline in that photo.
Which will all be out of the buffer.
Probably underneath the tree.
Yeah.
But can
I'm
you get?
sorry,
can
is
you
there
get
an intention to move the zip line, the tetherball, and the trampoline?
If required, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that photo gives us any real sense of the contours of the property. That's what we're looking for. Alex, is there anything, Alex or Chick, in our records that could show the contours of the property in the backyard?
Well, I believe the survey you saw had the
Yeah.
elevation.
Yeah, no, I mean,
initially.
based on that, yes, I see what Luke is saying. There's, you know, I mean, yes, it does slope up, but it's hard to tell from this whether there isn't some other flat areas.
Right, you see that the house is surrounded by approximately a 10-foot topo, and then it gradually slopes down towards the water. It's pretty consistent slope. It's not as if there's a sudden rise or dip anywhere looking at it that would prevent the play set from being removed. And I actually think Mark made the best point of all, saying, you know, it's not as if this is a swimming pool that would be burdensome to move. It's just a play set. It's just a play set. I don't get it.
Now,
Anyway,
I have to speak with the client. If we were to use the original buffer, going back to the procedural concerns, would this board give us time to plant that in such a way that it wouldn't delay consideration of the dock permit?
You know, it gets us into a couple of issues which I'm going over in my mind, which is to be consistent with different applicants. I'm not sure if we can hear the dock application, even though they haven't actually implemented the landscaping. I know in another case, they're adjourned until they implement the landscaping.
I think that just has to be the way we proceed. We're gonna spend the rest of our natural lifetimes arguing.
Yeah, if we make
With
one
Florida.
move off the Arias design line, then that says that that law that's on the books has no meaning. Because then any application that is under similar situations doesn't want to conform with the law that's carried with their property, can come in here and talk about it for 5 months, and then, you know, roll the dice. It's just,
The law expressly permits addressing the violation
Yes.
with this board.
yes, addressing the violation, like, and to me, that means get the property out of violation. It doesn't say come in and try to make a deal.
It permits a variance or other modification of the approval to obtain conformity.
Right, but do you not have to be in conformance first to then request a modification to that?
No.
They can request a modification as long as what they're dealing with is the specific to the sole violation. But there's really two issues that have been raised right now. So the chairman's point was, the way the board has been working with this legislation is, and it's already happened, and I think you were here for one of these hearings.
Sure.
Replanting is going to be done. The matter was adjourned to allow for the replanting, and then they're coming back. So it's a two-step process. The application was made to modify on the sole violation. I think council's question sort of was, well, okay, so if we go back to the original border, can we then go on to the kayak request? What the board has been doing, and I think it's consistent with the legislation as it is, unless it's modified, is that, okay, if they're going back to the original buffer as is, the way the board's been working with it is they would plant, come back, and then go forward.
And just one quick clarification, and we had covered this, but the purpose is to, it's substantially the sole purpose of the processing, in other words, this application, to cure the violations or to seek a variance from the Board of Appeals with regard to such violations. So it is permissible to seek the relief. The question is the relief warranted under the circumstances that we're talking about here?
Where do you want to leave it?
Well, I think we have a sense of where this board's going. I would ask for an adjournment, because this, either way, this has to remain open, the dock permit. And we'll talk to our client about addressing the old buffer.
Okay, so a motion.
well, hold
Go
on.
ahead.
That-
Go.
that doesn't work for me necessarily.
Right.
We gotta stop having this buffer conversation. How do we do that?
Well, I mean, listen, you can certainly adjourn it. Okay, I think the board's position is, to some extent with respect to this case, but also to have some sense of consistency and not, have hearings where we're, changing a prior condition, that received a benefit. And I understand the notice requirements and that the buyer didn't know about it, et cetera. But the property benefited, for essentially a trade, okay? The prior zoning board said, go ahead and expand the house, but you need to implement a buffer. The house was expanded, but the buffer was not implemented. So to some extent, the zoning board here is protective of that requirement. But so far, what we've seen to some extent is not really at all an equivalent buffer. And we've had other cases where an applicant might have appeared and said, I understand that you want a 50-foot wide buffer, but I'd like to give you an average 50-foot buffer. And again, in this case, for purposes of consistency, this board said, no, we really want 50 feet, everywhere, rather than 60 feet here and 40 feet here. The idea being, of course, with environmental guidance, that 50 feet is really what was protecting the wetlands, not an average, but just a minimum, essentially. So as we're hearing this case, yes, we're also concerned about consistency and having the right precedent set. And I think that's some of Luke's frustration in that, there's a clear pathway for this applicant, okay, to move forward, which is simply, acknowledge that perhaps he would have been better off knowing this when he bought the property, but it is a condition, that needs to be met.
Yeah, I would reiterate, the village didn't know this when he bought the property. The village issued a CO.
Yes.
So everyone was caught sort of unaware on this one. But I understand what you're saying with respect to the substance of the application. I don't see the harm in creating precedent that you will work with applicants on crafting a process that would allow them to give them time to get in conformance while considering new applications. And my suggestion is simply that you could give them time to plant a buffer. That would then deem them in conformity as they're within their time frame to plant the buffer, and then process a new application. This would not jeopardize the village's position. It wouldn't jeopardize the wetlands. If anything, you would be making us plant a buffer that we would then have to rip up to put portions of it, to put a dock in. So that's, putting aside the substance of the application, and I'm hearing you loud and clear on the substance of the modification. Procedurally, I don't think there is harm to this board, to the village, or to the public in balancing those equities and giving people an opportunity to get in conformity while seeking a new application. I don't appreciate the detriment to the village or this board's position in taking that position.
That's the way the law was written, wasn't it, Jeffrey?
It is. It is.
But this board can take an approach to it by saying, we'll give you time to get in conformity. And then just like that, we're in conformity and now can process a new application. And that's all I've been suggesting.
I'm not following that, because I thought what the law says is that we're not supposed to process the application until you're in conformity.
Yes,
Is
and you
that a
can create
succinct way to do it?
conformity by
Right.
giving us time to get in conformity. That's all I'm suggesting.
Just to clarify, but right now, the application before this board right now is to modify the prior grant of the wetlands permit. That hasn't been withdrawn. That's what this board is considering. There's no representation, and I think council can't represent this. He's saying he would need to speak to his client. There's no representation that's being withdrawn and that it's their intent to even come into compliance. That's not what's before the board. What's before the board is this application. So if the board could, if there's nothing else to be submitted, the board could close this to this, render decision as to this, and
Yeah,
The
but
applicant
I
can
don't think the
decide what to
applicant
do.
wants that.
I'm just
So,
saying
okay,
that's one, but that's the application
I'm
that's
with you.
before the
So
board.
I'm fine with, if you want to adjourn for all purposes, we'll adjourn for all purposes.
I just need,
What purpose does that serve?
He'll come back with whatever he wants to come back with, and, you know, I'd imagine, some other
the
site-
reaction of the board tonight is likely going to affect my client's position. I would just like an
Mhm.
opportunity to vet that.
I mean, there's no harm. Yes, I understand. Okay, let me motion to adjourn for all purposes. Let me make sure I have the right case number. So a motion to adjourn for all purposes, case number 3147, 64 Down East. Can I have a second?
Second.
And then all in favor for the adjournment?
Aye.
The next
Aye.
meeting,
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any opposed to the adjournment?
Opposed.
Okay, one opposed. So we'll move on to the next case.
What's the adjourn date?
The next
I just, I did want
It
to
would
check.
be-
I think it's probably the second.
It's our next
it's
meeting.
is the board's next scheduled, meeting,
What date?
April 27th.
Okay,
Thank
April 27th, Thursday.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Is it April 20, what about the first?
April
the second
22nd.
Tuesday?
We don't have that meeting. April 22nd is our next meeting.
Right,
Okay.
27th.
22nd.
27th? That's 27th.
Alex, is it April 27th or 22nd?
April 27th,
You
the
heard correct.
Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay,
If
April
that-
27th.
if- that'd be fine.
So there's no meeting on March 30th?
Correct.
No.
Thank you.
There's no Tuesday.
Okay, so we're moving to case number 3145, 44 Hillcrest Lane.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board and council. My name is Denise Shern, and I'm the attorney for the applicant on 44 Hillcrest Lane. As the board may recall, we are before you tonight seeking a variance in order to install a swimming pool in a technical front yard on this property. The lot is a through lot, meaning that it has frontage on both on two streets, Hillcrest Lane and also Miller Road. At the last meeting, the board asked us to demonstrate our ability to comply with the parking requirements on this lot. There are 4 required parking spaces for the number of bedrooms that are in the residence. As a result, we need to have, we needed to space out 4 spaces on the survey for you in the correct size and also situated at the correct setback, which is 5 feet from the street. So if I can share my screen, I will.
Did we get a hard copy of what you're gonna share?
There is a hard copy.
I
It
didn't.
did come in late.
Yes, I dropped it off at 1:25, I believe, on Thursday.
Oh, on Thursday?
On Thursday?
Okay.
Whatever day it was due, I'm sorry, I'm confused about
They're
dates.
around then. Never mind, but.
Yeah, it was not in my
you need
folder,
to
but
get
go
I
ahead.
need to see the piece of paper.
I understand. I apologize. I had a medical emergency.
I'm sorry, but, you know, we have other jobs and things. It's just the audacity that we should always be giving into this. It's very hard to do my job without the information. That's all I have to say.
I completely understand. I'd
Wait,
rather
wait.
not say this on the record, but I will. That
Counsel-
day,
Counsel, if the board requires, I think council's willing, but what she was just saying is there was a medical emergency that she had. Whether
Okay,
the
well,
board
I'm
chooses
sorry
to go
about
for,
that.
but it's up to the board as to
No,
whether or not.
go
there's-
ahead. No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's, we're down to the final details of this application at any rate.
so,
The video is off, even though the audio is on.
So it says you are sharing screen. Have you chosen something to share with us?
I think the applicant is putting forward the survey.
We could put this on the camera, on the table.
Did you want to use the camera?
Hey, good idea.
Council, do you want to just put this on, under the camera? There's a camera now on the table.
Just lay it flat on the table, facing the people on the dais. Seriously.
We, well, we can use the
I can
camera.
just put this under the camera
It's-
if you want. She gave me a whole explanation of how to do this. Let me see if I can get this right. So where do I go?
Face it towards the board.
Face it toward the board.
That's good.
That's good?
Yeah, you can zoom in.
There we go.
Okay.
Does that work?
We needed full screen if that's possible.
Hey, Council, I'm gonna walk away so you can.
Can we full screen and zoom in a little bit?
That's full screen as it gets.
Unless you turn it sideways.
See one like that.
You can turn it sideways, then we can see the parking.
You want to see
There we go.
the front first, and then, or I can do both at the same time. You prefer?
It's really the parking we're focused on, isn't it?
Yes. So we, as I said, we needed to add, or show you, demonstrate, 4 compliant parking spaces, which had to be a certain width, a certain depth, and also had to be situated 5 feet from the front yard lot line on each side. So you'll see that along Hillcrest, there are 2 spaces. Essentially, as they exist today, there needs to be a slight modification, enlargement of one of the spaces so that they're both compliant with the required size on Hillcrest Avenue. And on Miller Road, you'll see that you will come up here and take, I guess that'd be a left, into these 2 spaces here, on the other side of the property. We did look at trying to situate all 4 on Hillcrest Avenue, and we actually had a planner prepare an image for us so that we could see what it looked like, and unfortunately it takes up basically the entire front yard. So you could imagine this would double in size. So it takes up this amount of space, which is basically the entire front area, which now is a cute, aesthetically pleasing lawn area that's vegetated, and unfortunately would become gravel. We could vegetate around it, in between that and the house and on our side yards, because we have our setbacks there. But other than that, the rest of it would have to be gravel, and that seemed unfortunate.
How many bedrooms are in the house?
I believe it's 5.
There are 5 bedrooms in this house?
Yes, yes. And we proposed screening on the Miller Road side as requested by the board. As you'll see, screening in front of the pool area here, screening here, and then screening here as well. And all, 6 to 8 foot tall trees that will be evergreen.
Do any board members have any questions?
I just have a small one, and maybe you said this already.
It's okay.
Is there a reason why the parking area on Miller Road isn't just like a reflection of what's on Hillcrest? Did you say that already?
Oh, the same, because of the septic system.
Okay.
So we did 10 variations, if you can believe it, and each one, I came up against a setback of some sort, and in that case, it happened to be the septic system. The amount of room that it needed just was too large. I couldn't fit the required setback from there, and we trying not to go over the septic. I know you can technically, you know, with a covenant and some extra fees to the health department, but for logistical purposes, we were trying to keep it off
Okay,
of the
fair
septic.
enough. I get it.
But this says proposed sanitary system,
It's a new septic, yeah, we have to upgrade to the IA system.
because, why?
Well, environmental reasons.
No, I.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They pull all the houses into compliance now.
Well, but you're not doing anything to the house, as I
It's
understand. You're adding the
something-
pool, but
yeah.
because of adding the pool,
Oh,
it
well, the
triggers.
septic is actually where the pool is going, so it does have to be relocated.
Okay, so you're relocating the septic because of
Yes.
the pool.
Yes. Yeah, the two rings are like directly where the pool is now.
And like they couldn't get a ring where the proposed pool equipment is. Is that too close to the neighbors?
Behind. So
Yeah.
put an expansion ring over here. I don't know, maybe they could. Yeah, I don't know why they couldn't. I mean, I guess we could.
I mean, not to make this application drag on another 7 months, but I would request a parking waiver for this if I were you.
A parking waiver meaning
On the
not-
spaces,
or
like
not
one,
having
you know,
the
not have
spaces?
to have 4 spaces, have to have 3 maybe, because this is like the polar opposite of the application we saw before.
Right.
In where I can see that the 4 required spaces does kind of start to create a detriment to the homeowner.
Right.
When you factor in the size of the lot, the need for the new sanitary, and all that. I'm not telling you what to do.
Understood.
I think just to think out loud, I
Mhm.
think myself and some of the other board members were hoping this would be a case where we're considering, you know, planning where planning didn't previously exist, and the pool is fine, but we were hoping somehow to eliminate the ingress and egress from Miller Road, and then,
understand.
isn't that wonderful?
And I promise we looked at it 50 different ways, but and if I could share my screen with you, I would, although now, am I? I don't know. Maybe I am. But we do have an image of what it would look like to have the gravel in the front, and it's very unattractive.
I'd look at that.
Wanna look at that if I
Yeah.
can manage to.
And you might be right, maybe if it's 3 parking
Well,
spaces.
I'm not a big
but
fan
it's
of
on
a
Hillcrest.
completely gravel front yard personally.
Mhm.
I'm less of a fan of the idea of there being an entryway on Miller Road and on Hillcrest, given the stance we've had for so long about swimming pools in the front yard.
Well, I don't see how they can get around that and still have, I mean, first of all, how do we know anyone's ever gonna use those parking spaces? They're just required.
That's true. I will say that there's an ARB approval on record that shows 3 spaces on that side, the Miller side. And as you know, right now, there's just a driveway. There's not actually, the physical spaces were not actually put in. But the drawing is a very large driveway with 3 large spots, and
Well, can't you make the spaces out of permeable pavers?
they could use,
Grass?
yep, they could use grass pavers, definitely.
So then, what's the rub?
Yeah, I mean it looks like that's what they're proposing on Miller,
Yes.
Susan.
I think
That-
that's a good idea, and for the driveway. I understand it's a requirement, it's just,
Mm-hmm.
you know, okay, so now what? And you cannot drive a car past the house, so that, you're limited to either I think to completely make the front yard gravel is a real assault on the neighbors and the,
Agreed. I agree.
personally, I would not agree to that, so there you go.
Great. I guess it's not gonna come up on there, but this
What's that area on this side where it says gravel? Is that not possible to be a,
The area.
oh, I see. It says gravel, but there's no way to access it. It's over the paver's walk. So it's not as if we could allocate a parking spot there.
Oh, right, yes, that's true, that's true.
Could there be a circular driveway with 2 curb cuts
In the front?
on Hillcrest? Could
I
that
did-
work?
I did
It's too-
see that you
I think it's
allow circular.
too shallow?
driveways.
Too narrow. I mean, we're not, I think they would have thought of that by now. It doesn't fit.
That's right, we couldn't put the 3 in the U-shaped driveway, because that's what we were trying to do, was 3, we tried, like I said, 10 different options, but that didn't work. Did not
So-
fit.
So isn't this the only place they could have it, except for the whole gravel front yard? I mean, what are the other options? What are we
Luke-
doing
Couldn't
here?
you do like a
Yeah.
parking courtyard centered in the front or something like that, so you have grass on
They
either
don't have
side?
enough space, I don't
We
think.
don't, that's.
Tiny.
I wish we
I
did,
think the
but
homeowner
it's-
wants to speak.
Oh, okay,
He has his hand up.
sure, Stephen.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's coming in.
Hey, so it's only 4 bedrooms.
Oh, I'm
We in
sorry,
fact
thank
do
you.
only have 1 car.
4 bedrooms.
This whole thing about the parking lot is all based on trying to be in compliance to get a pool.
Yes, and we're on
So
board,
technically-
we're on board with the pool, but then if you only have 4 bedrooms, why do you need to show 4 parking spaces?
That's what
I'm not sure why, that was what was told us last time.
So the plans that were submitted to the Architecture Review Board, when the Architecture Review Board reviewed this house, required that there be 4 spaces for 5 bedrooms. Sometimes it's a bedroom or bedroom equivalent. For example, there's certain rooms, if you have a living room and a den, the den counts for an additional parking space, or a study, or an office, or similar.
You have that? Do you have a
It's
den
a-
with a bathroom? That is true, yeah.
There's no, there's a den space, but it's like next to the,
It's a large closet.
It's near the heater, and like it's near the utilities, like where the water filter is. It's not really a bedroom.
So how many square feet is the house?
1,000?
Just over 1,000, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, something's just amiss here, that an 1,000 square foot house requires 4 parking spaces. And my question, I guess, is,
That's true.
and really, we want you to have this pool, we'd like to move on. What we're hoping for is, if you only need 3 spaces, if somehow
Yes.
we got there, would you be able to find 3 spaces and close off Miller Road and have a big backyard and have this really be a backyard? I think that's
Yeah,
our goal. We'd
I-
love it if that was the outcome.
Yeah, I really don't think that we should give up access to what we consider our backyard, because the concern is that, like, member Susan brought up, there's no way to get stuff around the house. The house, it's not a big lot, and so you need the egress from the back to help with, because remember too that we don't have any garage now as we had hoped, so there's no way to put surfboards and bicycles. It's all gonna have to come from the other side.
I have a question for Alex. Alex, so obviously understanding the health department and how they calculate rooms versus bedrooms, but isn't there also a rule for minimum bedroom size? And if the room that's getting us caught up is really as small as these guys say, like, wouldn't that supersede the view that a spare room is a bedroom?
So there's 2 different requirements. The health department regulations have to do with septic flow.
Right.
The parking requirements come from the zoning ordinance. It's a local village law, and it's not the same as the health department requirements. And what the code says is bedrooms, and it lists some other examples of similar rooms that legally count for zoning parking purposes as bedrooms, as interpreted by the building inspector. So that was I think the determination that was made here.
Okay, so my question is, like, in Southampton town, I know that there is a minimum size of a room where it won't be considered a bedroom anymore. And I've dealt with that specifically around rental permits when the code guy comes in and takes a look. So again, my question is there a threshold size at which a room gets so small that it can't feasibly or legally be considered a bedroom?
There is not in our parking ordinance. It's unless the building inspector makes a determination that it would be so infeasible to consider something a bedroom that it doesn't count. But so it's up to the building inspector's determination.
Okay, and so in this instance, the building inspector looked at the plans and said that could be a bedroom?
Well, I think what the plans had said was that it was being built as a quote-unquote 5-bedroom house, and so it required for parking spaces.
And I think also, was it Stephen who was speaking?
Yes.
I
Yes,
think what Stephen's
Stephen,
saying
yes.
is also this, it's important to them to have this access.
Yes.
And to, just for,
Like
mobility.
the guy who mows the lawn, where's he gonna go? I mean, really, I get it.
Yeah, no, I get it, I get it.
Delivering.
And the
I mean,
person that
it's
takes
not-
care of the pool. The person
It's a
that takes care of the
problem.
pool.
To get it.
Yeah.
So can we move the landscaping to the perimeter?
Mm-hmm.
And I know Susan at one point said, let's block the pool, but aren't we blocking the pool by moving the landscaping to the perimeter?
To
Yes,
the
and that's
perimeter.
there's blocking there, that makes sense to us too.
I'm sorry,
Fine.
so you want, to the side of the property?
To
No,
the
no,
Miller
so
Lane
that we
Road.
cover the cars and the,
Cover everything, just
yes.
heavy
Here?
screening, and then
Yes.
it already looks like you're doing it with proposed, with the grass pavers, so it's not gonna be gravel, it'll
Right.
be elegant.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, the hope is that it won't, like you said, that nobody will ever park there. But you do want the pool person to be able to bring their car to do the pool maintenance and,
yeah, if we write it as a condition that you'll show us a landscape plan with perimeter landscaping, and as a condition that we're gonna have these grass pavers, so it won't really read like a
Right.
driveway,
Right.
that's the best balance I think we can strike here.
yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Does that seem okay with you?
Sure.
And
Could I just clarify on the, just for the perimeter landscaping? You just mean on the sides and keep
I mean
it
on Miller Road,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
okay.
Miller Road, just bring it up to on both sides, bring it up to where you're entering here. We just want it to look as much as possible,
Mhm.
given that you also need some mobility, we want it to look as much as possible as a backyard.
Got it. Okay.
Does that seem okay, Julia?
It'll have to be. I have real concerns about that now, though, about what the future will bring.
Yeah, no, I do too. But it's so tight in the front that I just don't know how they satisfy the parking and have a functional property.
No, I appreciate that. I do, I appreciate it. I'm more concerned about the future. I don't know if this will be a first for this board.
Well, there are no structures. I mean, there is the pool, but the pool is, what's the distance from Miller Road to the pool? It's at least
Like,
35.
it's like 35 feet,
Oh, no, the pool is much
No,
further.
the pool looks more
It's
like,
about 70 feet.
looks like
oh,
70
70
feet.
feet, oh.
I mean, that's with the screening. Okay, we can deliberate and always, but for right now, can I motion to, up to you. I would
Close.
close for decision case number 3145 44 Hillcrest Lane. Can I have a second?
Second,
And all in favor of closing for decision case number 3145, please say aye.
May I just ask, I don't think there was anybody else who wanted
yeah.
from the
Point.
public.
Is there anybody from the public who wishes to be heard on this? Is there anybody on camera?
No, there's no hands up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, we'll close for decision, case number 3145. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So to new cases, we have case number 3154, Greg and Elizabeth Kaplan, 50 Old Town Road.
Hello.
Hello. Lisa Zaloga, I'm the architect for the applicant. So this is a pre-existing non-conforming house on Old Town Road. And we're looking for a total side yard variance. The existing house is non-conforming to total side yards. It's conforming to minimum side yards, but not the total side yards. And our goal is to push the garage 6 feet forward, which is still 4 feet further than the
Excuse me?
required.
If you could just, I think Sage is saying, if you could just turn the,
Rotate 180, Lisa.
There we
Okay.
go.
Okay. Okay, it's over here now. Our goal is to push the garage forward 6 feet towards the street, which is still 4 feet further back than our required front yard. However, to line it up with the existing side yard requires a variance for our total side yards. It's a total of 32 square feet. It's this little corner right here. And I have a letter of support from the neighbor on that side, which is the south side, which is Andrew Polaro, and he wrote a letter, as well as I have a letter of support from a neighbor 2 houses to the north. We went in front of the ARB yesterday, and they didn't have any problems with it, other than asking me to kind of put some more decoration on the front gable, which I'm not asking for a variance for, but they didn't have any issues with it. So that's pretty much the general idea.
So what's the total side yard setbacks?
The total side yard setbacks are, on that side, it's 14.8, and on the other side, it's 9.8, so a total of 24.6,
Right, so 24.6 is the total, and
where 30 is required, I
Okay.
believe.
is that correct, Alex? The total side yard setback here will be 24.6 feet where 30 is required?
Correct. I believe that's how it's written on the denial as well.
Correct.
Okay, but your improvements, your additions are not going any closer to any of the side yards as the house currently?
Correct. Correct.
Lisa,
And
this,
that side yard is that's the 14.8 foot side yard that's currently existing.
So you're maintaining the 14.8 feet, you're just moving closer to the street,
Correct.
and you're within the front yard setback.
Yes, I'm further than that by 4 feet.
what might be helpful even more than the survey is the first floor plan.
This is the first floor plan.
Okay.
It's this little square right here that is,
Right,
Yeah,
okay,
correct.
so I'm with you. Do you have
Go-
an existing first floor plan?
Yeah. Can you show us the benefit to the applicant?
all right, so the benefit to the applicant is that they're trying to, basically when they bought this house, it was not a full-time year-round house, and now it's about to become a year-round house. And so they were trying to increase and create a closet for the master bedroom. That was what caused us to push the garage forward some. So that was where we're doing, and these dotted lines here are where the existing floor is. I didn't bring an actual first floor plan, but that dotted line is where the current garage
Mhm.
ends now.
Gotcha.
So it's 6 feet forward, and the majority of it, of course, is conforming. It's just this square on the side here. It's like the sheet of plywood.
Are you expanding the second floor as well?
We are. We're expanding the second floor. I have the second floor plan if you wanna see it. That doesn't require any variances. Oops, sorry.
It- Well, isn't that also part of the setback from the side yard? Isn't it above that?
It is, but it's, again, if you look at the elevation here, you can see it's a the dotted line here is the floor level.
Wait, can we zoom in on? Mhm.
So the dotted line here is the floor level over the garage. So there is a window over the garage, but the heights, by the time you get to this ridge, it's like 7 feet,
Mhm.
which you can see on this floor plan here. So I've kind of called it a closet. It's really, my plate height at that wall is 4 feet. It doesn't meet habitable space or anything, that counts towards gross floor area, anything else
On the second floor.
on the second floor.
Luke, do you have any questions?
No, it's a big bedroom.
It's a big bedroom. This bedroom?
Yeah, it's like 19 feet wide, right?
No.
1810?
This bedroom?
Downstairs, first floor.
Oh, the first floor bedroom.
Yeah.
That is an existing wall. I mean, I suppose, yeah, I guess it's wider than, I mean, that's existing. I didn't try to maneuver with that. I had the existing windows, the existing bedroom. I was just trying to maintain what was there.
So you're creating a second closet.
I'm creating a second closet. Right, that's the goal.
I mean, I'm just not seeing a substantial detriment to the neighborhood.
No, and like I said, Andrew Polaro wrote the letter saying he's in full support of it. He's the neighbor to the south, the closest neighbor.
Julie
and
or
the
Susan?
ARB had no problems with it either.
Yeah, watched.
I went
yeah.
over and looked at what's there, and I hear what she's saying. And the way the garage sticks out when you look at it, the property from the street. So moving the garage forward, I don't think is really detrimental. And however many feet for a closet, it doesn't bother me. It's okay with me.
Julie, do you have any questions or comments?
No, not on this case.
Joyce?
No, I mean, it seems like a pretty minor ask for what they're trying to achieve, I think.
So, I mean, I would motion to close for all purposes. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, so I'll motion to close for all purposes. Can I have a second?
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
I
Thank you. Then I'll motion to close the public hearing of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.